In the heart of a boundless land lies Meramara, a kingdom of gold and glory. A realm ruled by queens and guarded by 12 warriors of legend, the Jemaya. They are chosen by the great goddess Yahagi, the deity of love and power, but also of secrets. For the stories of the gods are not all beautiful. Legend has it that one day Yahagi fell in love with one of the gods in the sky, and she lay with him. She fell pregnant and gave birth to twin boys, one that was pure and handsome, and the other evil and hideous. From her love came life. From her pain came a curse. When the twins reached adult age, the handsome one happened to look down onto the earth, and his gaze fell on a lovely young mortal woman. Immediately he lost his heart to her and swooped down to earth to cut her. A love story began. Their union birthed greatness, a powerful daughter, the first Jemaya. On the other hand, Yahagi's vile-hearted son could not find any woman on earth who wanted to lie with him. They all repulsed him and called him names. In desperation, he lay with a beast, and while he did so, he cursed man and womankind. From hatred came abominations. His animal bride conceived and bore the first half-beings, creatures that were part man and part animal. Now, on one side of the majestic Njabi River, the noble daughters of Meramara flourish. On the other, in the cursed land of the half-beings, creatures born of hatred and despair stir in the dark. For generations, the magic of Yahagi has kept these monsters at bay. But how long before it breaks? The Kingdom of Damba roared with life, a sprawling expanse of gold-streaked savannas, bustling marketplaces, and mighty stone fortresses. Its people were hardy and proud, their skin kissed by the sun, and their lives filled with the rhythm of drums, the clinking of cowrie shells, and the laughter of children. Beneath the fiery sky, Damba thrived like a stubborn baobab tree, its roots dug deep into the earth of legend. At the heart of this kingdom stood a grand palace, its red stone walls shimmering in the heat. This was the home of King Iswa, a cunning leader whose iron fist had kept Damba's enemies at bay for 3 decades. Beside him, always close, was his most trusted warlord, Kann-Bako, the destroyer of nations. Kann-Bako had been born into nothing. His mother, a widow from a forgotten village, had died before he could walk. The boy was raised by scavengers and learned early that the world was cruel and that mercy was a weakness. By the age of 12, he had killed his first man, a slaver who tried to sell him. By 16, he had gathered a gang of cutthroats and plundered small villages along the kingdom's edge. His reputation reached King Iswa, who admired strength above all. The king summoned him, not to punish, but to reward. Iswa saw in Kann-Bako a raw, untamed wolf, and he needed such wolves to protect his throne. Kann-Bako rose quickly through the ranks, his cunning and brutality unmatched. Over 2 decades, he crushed rebellions, defeated foreign invaders, and expanded Damba's borders. But Kann-Bako was no hero. His men whispered tales of his cruelty, how he burned villages to the ground, slaughtered the innocent, and enslaved survivors. Women feared him. He took what he wanted without a second thought. And yet, the king loved him like a son, for Kann-Bako's victories brought wealth and glory to Damba. One evening, as the sun bled red across the savannah, Kann-Bako sat in the king's hall. The air smelled of roasted goat and palm wine, and laughter echoed off the high ceilings. Iswa leaned forward on his throne, his eyes alight with curiosity. "You've heard the whispers, Kann-Bako," the king said. "A kingdom beyond the western sea, where gold flows like water. Its people are soft, their warriors few. What say you?" Kann-Bako, tall and swarthy, with a shaved head that gleamed under the torchlight, smirked. His voice was deep, a rumble like distant thunder. "If such a place exists, my king, I will bring its wealth to your feet. I will plunder their riches and leave their land in ashes." Iswa chuckled, raising a goblet. "That is why you are my destroyer of nations. Prepare your ships, Kann-Bako. The sea awaits." Kann-Bako wasted no time. He gathered his men, hardened warriors who lived for the thrill of battle. They called themselves the Storm of Damba, a name earned through countless victories. Among them was Bajo, a one-eyed veteran who served as Kann-Bako's second in command, and Niru, a young recruit with a fiery temper and a thirst to prove himself. Kann-Bako addressed them in the barracks, his voice cutting through the noisy preparations. "We sail west to claim what is ours," he began, pacing before them. "I expect loyalty. Weakness will not be tolerated. We will be legends or we will die, but we will not fail." The men roared in agreement, their voices shaking the walls. Days leading to the voyage were filled with chaos. The marketplace bustled as workers loaded the ships with supplies, sacks of yams, barrels of water, and weapons sharpened to deadly perfection. Traders yelled over each other, selling dried fish, bright fabrics, and beads. The air was thick with heat and the smell of sweat, spices, and livestock. The ships themselves were massive, carved from iron wood and reinforced with brass fittings. Their sails, dyed crimson, bore the emblem of Damba, a roaring lion. Kann-Bako inspected them himself, his sharp eyes missing nothing. "Strong winds will carry us," Bajo remarked, standing beside him. "And blood will stain the decks," Kann-Bako replied coldly. Not everyone in Damba admired Kann-Bako. Among them was Zulai, the king's daughter, a sharp-tongued woman who despised the warrior. She confronted him one evening as he sharpened his blade. "You destroy everything you touch," she said, her voice cutting through the stillness. "What happens when there's nothing left to conquer?" Kann-Bako looked up, his dark eyes unreadable. "Then I will carve my name into the stars." Zulai shook her head. "Your arrogance will be your downfall." Kann-Bako laughed, a harsh sound. "Stay in your place, princess. I serve your father, not you." But her words lingered, a thorn in his pride. As the ships neared readiness, a small rebellion broke out in a border village. Kann-Bako was ordered to quash it. He rode out with a handful of men. Finding the rebels, a desperate group of farmers and their families, rather than negotiate, Kann-Bako set their fields ablaze and executed their leader. His men followed his lead, but Niru hesitated when ordered to kill a young mother and her child. "You question me?" Kann-Bako growled, his voice like a whip. "They are not threats," Niru argued, his hands trembling. Kann-Bako drew his sword and cut the woman down himself. Turning to Niru, he snarled, "Mercy is death. Learn that or die." The day finally came. The sun rose over Damba, painting the kingdom in shades of gold and crimson. Crowds gathered at the port, cheering as Kann-Bako and his men boarded the ships. Drums thundered and dancers performed in celebration. King Iswa stood at the edge of the dock, his face a mask of pride. "Bring me the wealth of kings, Kann-Bako," he commanded. "I will bring you the world," Kann-Bako promised. As the ship sailed west, cutting through the glittering waves, Kann-Bako stood at the prow, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The wind carried him forward, but deep in his heart, he felt the weight of something unspoken. A shadow of doubts, perhaps, or the memory of Zulai's words. But he dismissed it with a scowl. The sea was vast, but his ambition was greater. Nothing would stop him. Kann-Bako stood at the front of the boat and looked at the shore of the kingdom of Meramara. He smiled widely and took a deep breath. Finally, the goal of Meramara was so close. The journey to get here had been hard. They had crossed many big rivers. At first, his men were excited, but after traveling for so long, they started losing hope. Some even wondered if Meramara was real. Before they left their kingdom to find the gold, people had told many stories about Meramara. Some said it didn't exist. Others warned that no one who went there ever came back. A few even said that the land was full of spirits that attacked strangers. Kann-Bako turned to his 60 men on the boat. He pointed to the shore and shouted, "Look, men, there it is, Meramara. Gold is waiting for us." The men cheered loudly. Kann-Bako smiled. These were his men, and he always looked out for them. He could never lose. Even death was afraid of him. Meramara would be easy to take, and its gold would be his. He grinned. On a hill near Meramara, a guard saw the boats coming. From the sails he knew they were not friendly. Meramara was in danger. The guard lit a fire to send a warning. Then he blew a horn 3 times. The sound traveled far to the next guard on another hill. By the time the boats reached the shore and the men began to get off, the warning had already reached the capital city, Boudica. In the palace, the ruler of Meramara sat on a beautiful gold throne, meeting with the chiefs. A guard ran in and knelt before the throne. With a shaky voice, he shared the bad news. The room fell silent. Then the ruler turned to a messenger and said, "Call the 12 commanders of the army. Tell them to get ready. I will join them." Soon, the ruler and the 12 fighters rode through the massive gates of Boudica to face the 1,200 invaders. Kann-Bako and his men marched onto the land with their guns ready. But before they could take a step, arrows rained down on them from 100 archers hidden in the valley. 2 of Kann-Bako's men fell. "Shoot!" Kann-Bako roared, and his men fired their guns. The loud gunshots filled the valley. The arrows were no match for the bullets, and the archers started falling. Those who were still alive ran away. Kann-Bako turned to his second-in-command, Bajo, and grinned. "This will be easier than I thought." Bajo laughed and led the men forward, with his sword drawn. They were confident that victory was theirs. Kann-Bako pointed to a hill and shouted, "The gold is waiting for us. Let's go." Suddenly, Nehru tapped him and pointed up. "Look, my lord." Kann-Bako looked at the hill. He saw 13 figures on horseback, wearing bright red cloaks with hoods. He puffed up his chest and shouted, "I am Kann-Bako, the mighty commander of King Iswa's army. I am known as the destroyer of nations. People fear me everywhere. I have come to take the gold of Meramara for my king. Surrender now, or I will destroy your land and your people." The 13 figures got off their horses and stood silently. Their red cloaks touched the dusty ground, and their faces were hidden. Kann-Bako yelled again, "Did you not hear me? Surrender now!" A strong voice from the group replied, "No!" The men with Kann-Bako gasped. Though the figures were far away, it was clear. They were women. "Women?" Nehru whispered. "Yes," Kann-Bako said. "That means they will be easier to kill." The women wore bright red sheaths. They carried gold swords and shields. Kann-Bako laughed. "Where is your king? Is he hiding in his palace? I don't mind killing women, but where is your king?" One of the women stepped forward. "I am Alosha, Queen of Meramara." "A queen?" Kann-Bako laughed even harder. Then he shouted, "Prepare to die, my queen." He aimed his gun and started to move forward. Before Kann-Bako could fire, Queen Alosha charged down the hill. As she ran, the ground began to shake. Cracks opened in the earth, and some of Kann-Bako's men fell into the holes. Bajo screamed as he disappeared into the ground. Kann-Bako froze in shock. His friend was gone. Suddenly, another woman jumped into the air. She seemed to fly above the hill for a moment before diving toward the army with her sword raised. "This is witchcraft," one of Kann-Bako's men shouted. Kann-Bako snapped out of his shock. Shoot them! Shoot now! But before they could aim, another woman on the hill took a deep breath and blew out hard. A powerful wind carried sand through the valley, blinding the invaders. The men stumbled in confusion. Their guns were useless. Everywhere, sand swirled and blocked their view. Panic spread. "My lord Kann-Bako, save me," Neru's voice. Kann-Bako tried to peer forward. Nothing. He raised his hands in front of his face. His heart almost stopped beating. What kind of magic is this? He could not even see his hand. Shrieks of terror rent the air all about him, but no. He lifted his head and stared into the blindness. The fear would not overcome him. "I am Kann-Bako, glorious chieftain of Damba. I will not scream." All of a sudden, he felt cold steel at his neck, and a warm feminine voice whispered in his ear, "Destroyer of nations, prepare to die. The gold of Meramara belongs in Meramara." In one fluid movement, Queen Alosha slit his throat from one end to the other. Two decades later, in the flourishing kingdom of Meramara, in the Golden Palace, jealousy stirs. An older sister passed over, the younger princess inherits the throne. A pregnant queen-to-be poisoned by one she trusts. Her baby daughter cast into the land of the ferocious, man-eating half-beings.